Comprehensive planning for the city of Annapolis. So thanks, Julian. So we're actually going live now. We stream these meetings on the city's YouTube account. So there may be others watching, and we record this and make it available to folks to watch later. Yeah, I see many familiar faces and names. I know we have a few new folks tonight. And so as we've done in the past, this is our third meeting of the Choice Neighbor Initiative Neighborhood Task Force. I just want to go ahead and do the introductions so we all know who's here. But again, I'm in the Planning and Zoning Department. I'm the chair of the Neighborhood Task Force, and happy to be part of this project. Let's go with other City of Annapolis folks that are on. Teresa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Teresa Wellman. I'm Chief of Community Development for the City of Annapolis.
Right. Denise. Me on mute.
I'm sorry. Denise Ruffin, Housing Affordability Specialist for the City of Annapolis.
All right. I think we had Captain Miguez. He's still on?
Yes, Amy Miguez, captain with the police department.
Great. Thanks for being here. We have a few other folks from the City of Annapolis who are part of the project, not on the call. In fact, we have a representative from the Department of Public Works, Marcia Patrick, who's the Deputy Director, and Marcus Moore, Superintendent of Annapolis Transit, is representing the Department of Transportation, and Archie Trader, the Director of Recreation and Parks, is also part of the task force. Unfortunately, couldn't be here tonight, but let's go ahead. I see Melissa Maddox Evans from HACA is here.
Yes, Melissa Maddox Evans, Executive Director, Housing Authority, City of Annapolis.
Thank you. Bridget.
Yes, good evening. Bridget McLaughlin, Director of Resident Services, Housing Authority, City of Annapolis.
Great. And no one else from HACA on this meeting. Am I right about that? Is anybody else? And we have members of our planning consultant team. Maggie is here.
Hey guys, I'm Maggie Merrill with EJP Consulting Group. We're part of the planning coordinator team.
And I know Matthew will be joining later, also from the team. I'm going to go through everybody else on my Hollywood squares here. Alba.
Good evening, everyone. This is my very first meeting at the very last minute. I was told to participate, which is okay. From Anne Arundel County Public Schools, from the Office of Equity. And I'm the Family and Community Specialist.
Thanks for being here. Christy Unruh.
Hi, I'm Christy Unruh. I signed up originally for the People Task Force, but I thought I'd join this one as well. I'm just a relatively new neighbor in the neighborhood and wanted to just see what's going on and get involved.
Thanks for joining. Jane. You're on mute.
I'm unmuted, Jane Lawrence now. I'm on the board of Seats for Success, and we mentor and tutor kids in public housing and Hispanic community.
You're coming in pretty faint, Jane. Just to let you know. I'm not sure why, but right. Mike Tomasini.
Thanks, Eric. My name is Mike Tomasini. I am a small business owner in Eastport, resident, and the president of the Eastport Business Association. I was unable to attend the first two meetings, but I'm really happy to be able to participate tonight and hope that I can contribute.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Joel and person with the name Jolinger on there. I don't know what that. If that's your last name.
Sorry, it's Judy Olinger. I'm with Chesapeake Neighbors, and we are a up and coming affordable housing developer in Anne Arundel County and on the Midshore. So I was at the first meeting. I missed the last meeting, so I'm excited to be here tonight.
Thanks for joining.
Mhm.
Paul?
Hi, Paul Rankin, with Eastport Civic Association. I'm secretary with the group. Bill Reichart is not able to make it tonight. He's on travel, but we're excited to be, of course, part of the group and have been participating in these meetings. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Kathy?
Hello, everybody. I am Kathy Ebner. I'm an Eastport resident, and I am chair of the City of Annapolis Affordable Housing Commission.
Thanks, Kathy. Jessica Neal?
Hi, I'm Jessica Neal. It's my first meeting, and I'm here with the Anne Arundel Conflict Resolution Center.
Thanks for joining. Jess Packler?
Hi, I'm Jess Packler, COVID in her house. I am a 20+ year resident of Eastport on President Street and mom of 4 kids. And I'm the Ward 8 Commissioner on the Education Commission and the Annapolis Middle School PTSA President, and I'm admin on the Eastport Neighborhood Forum. And I'm really excited about the whole process and what we're learning.
Thanks, Jess. Julie, I should have introduced you as part of the planning team. Sorry about that. See you here. Julie Snyder.
Hi, I'm Julie Snyder, and I represent the Community Action Agency, and we are supporting HACA and the city within the CNA program.
All right. Mike L.
Hi, Mike LaFortune. I'm president of the Shearwater Condominiums HOA. I attended the first meeting. I wasn't able to attend the second one. I'm glad to be here tonight. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks for joining. Kimberly.
Hi, Kimberly Richer. I'm Eastport resident and voucher, acting grandmother to 2 children in HACA, and board member of Charting Careers.
Thanks for joining. Daisha.
Hi, I'm Daisha Conti, resident of the Eastport neighborhood, and I'm also the community connector for HACA and Community Action Agency.
Thank you for being here. I should have introduced you too as part of the planning team. Vicky Mead.
Yes, hi. I'm here as an interested neighbor, and I live near the corner of President Street and Jackson Street. I don't represent anybody officially.
That's okay. And Lavelle, last one, I think, on my screen.
My name is Lavelle Offer. I run a nonprofit called Small City Big Dreams, and we operate out the Eastport Substation. And we help people. We take people to rehab, help people get jobs and stuff like that. We're real active in the community.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, for those who don't know, the Eastwood Substation is a space that's in the Harbor House Apartments that the city of Annapolis opened up that functions as a police substation, but also community resource center. If I have that correct, but that's I think been around for about a year now. Is that right, Lavelle?
Yeah, about a year now. Yep.
All right. All right. Let me.
I think we got one more.
Oh, we did.
Amy McGuinness.
Oh. Captain McGuinness. I think she did introduce herself earlier, but.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Captain McGuinness is here from Annapolis Police. Let me go ahead and I'm going to share my screen and just kind of show everyone what we're doing tonight. Let's see. All right, hopefully you can, oops, let me switch this. Okay, hopefully you can see my agenda slide here. We have a lot of, I'd say, a number of new people tonight who haven't been at previous meetings. So I'm just going to kind of run through the Choice Neighbor Initiative process with a few slides, and then we're going to kind of get into the real meat of the night. The way it's conceived is to talk about early action activities, and this is a aspect of the Choice Neighbor Initiative where there is a budget for projects that we can do as a kind of initial implementation of improvements in the neighborhood. And we're going to talk a little bit about that again. We talked about it at the last meeting, but I think our discussion was brief, and so I wanted to carry that on. And there was some specific interest in streetscape improvements. I want to talk specifically about that. But so we'll get into the discussion shortly. But let me just get into a few of these preliminary slides to make sure we're all on the same page here. This is our project location. You can see in the bright yellow area, that is the Housing Authority property, the Eastport Terrace and Harbor House communities. And that is the community that we are working to revitalize with this project. But you see in the light green area that has this red dashed boundary that goes all the way up to State Street, I believe, over to Bay Ridge Avenue, down to Tyler and Hilltop Lane, and then over to Primrose and cutting through Truxton Park. That is kind of our extended study area. And the reason we have this larger area is because one of the main goals here is to better integrate the HACA communities with the surrounding neighborhood. And that cuts across all kinds of neighborhood aspects that we'll talk about in a bit. But this was one of the maps that we prepared to receive funding from the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department is funding this planning process. So in brief, we are in the midst of a approximately year-long planning effort where we are trying to come to some consensus on what the future community should look like, how it should connect with the surrounding neighborhood. And there are two other task forces. Many of you know there's a housing task force and a people task force. And this neighborhood task force is really focused on neighborhood planning issues and kind of looking at the larger neighborhood that I was just talking about. But in part one here, assessment, this is the part of the process that's coming to a close right now. We're kind of moving into part two, but you can see in number one, we've really been primarily taking stock of the existing conditions. And these are both conditions on the ground, housing, people who lives here, what are their interests and hopes and dreams. And we're moving into a phase where we're actually going to start visioning and thinking about and getting down on paper and the kinds of things that we want to see in the future. So it's very aspirational, but also kind of grounded in what we can do realistically. And so that's where we have our planning consultants involved. Maggie's representing tonight, and they've been really helping us through this process. So I'm going to talk about some events coming up in a moment that are part of that process. But you can see we're working towards June of next year, where we are required to have a master plan for the revitalization in place. So that's where we're moving. And we have these task forces for specific reasons. This is really a community-led process. I think it's important to say that, in general, when development happens in Annapolis, you have a property owner, developer proposing something for a site, building, a type of use. The community then comments on that development, and it might change in some ways to meet the community's interests. We're sort of doing things differently with this project, where we're starting with the community's interests, and that means both residents of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, but also the larger neighborhood resident community, and really trying to understand what people want to see in this project. And that's why we refer to it as community-led process. And it's really important distinction, I think, for this. It doesn't happen very often, not often enough. So, but we really rely on these task forces to bring in insight and perspective from kind of diversity of opinions and lived experiences. So we're really trying to make sure that these groups represent who lives in Eastport today, and different organizations that have an interest in helping Eastport. We expect participation in the task force to be kind of a sliding scale. I mean, just attending these meetings is really the minimum, but you can do more in sort of bringing other people to the meetings, helping to promote the project. We could even have follow-up meetings if there's particular interests, and meet on specific topics. But that's really what we're looking for in the task force members. And then kind of when we talk about neighborhood planning, the neighborhood task force, we're talking about specific goals for this neighborhood. And these are really the topics that summarize most of the big issues that we're looking at. And there are others, but this is kind of the big ones that we're interested in impacting with this process: public safety, economic development, neighborhood improvement, which could be physical spaces, but also programs and services, and environmental justice, that deals with the quality of the environment that people live in, and access to healthy environment, and so forth. So just another way of looking at what we mean by neighborhood planning. These are some of the ways to visualize that: mobility, infrastructure, public safety. This is an image actually of the Community Resource Center at Robinwood being opened last year. And then small businesses, open space. This is open space images of the Hawkins Cove area behind the HACA offices, and then neighborhood housing. And this is some of the affordable housing in our study area outside of the HACA communities on Hilltop Lane. I think this was done by Habitat for Humanity, I believe. So really big announcement to make that I want everybody to be aware of. We have some workshops coming up in this month, in a couple weeks. The one on the 21st is designed for everybody from the community to attend. These are sort of open house style events where people can drop in. Our planning team will be there with different stations and information about all kinds of topics related to this project and the neighborhood. There'll be opportunities to participate, and it's the event on the 21st. I should say all of these are in-person meetings. I wanted to share the events on the 20th just so folks can see what we're doing kind of in the big picture, that even though those are really aimed for residents of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, the youth planning one in the afternoon on the 20th, and then right after that in the evening, we have a workshop for current residents. But so we're really trying to reach a pretty broad population with these events. But the one on the 21st is an ideal event for people to come to who may want to know more about this project. They don't want to be as involved as coming to these task force meetings. Maybe they live in the neighborhood or have some connection to the neighborhood and just want to learn about this process and share their opinion. That event on the 21st would be a great event to come to. And these are all in-person events at the Eastport Community Center, which is right on President Street at Eastport Terrace. And if anybody's voted in the neighborhood, that's where you've voted at. So it's a gym space, and I'm looking forward to these events. Maggie, anything else you'd like to share about these events?
Yeah, I wanted to, first of all, just reiterate, please come. It's open to, on the 21st, it's open to everybody in the community, organizations, individuals, neighbors, anybody. Bring people with you. Children are also welcome at those evening sessions. We'll have some activities for them to do. It's an opportunity to really get everybody grounded in the data and the analysis and assessment that we did in that first block of the planning process map, but also really to start thinking about what we want the community to look like. What are some of the elements that we want, elements we might not want, how we want things to look, all of that sort of stuff. And so it's a great opportunity. It is a set agenda. So please, if you're going to come at 6:30 when it starts. We will be having stations that you will be going around to sort of viewing and absorbing different pieces of data, basically, that we've put together. And so you can kind of digest it and think about it, and then having a small discussion about what stood out to you, what surprised you, that sort of discussion. And then we will also use that opportunity to, like I said, begin the visioning process. So please, everybody, come on the 21st, bring people with you. It'll be a great opportunity to hear everybody, to get everybody's voice.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hope to see everyone there. This neighborhood task force, is really, I like to think of it as an iterative process, meaning we're trying to build on each meeting and continue the ideas that are shared at each meeting, and try to answer some of the questions that come up and expand on the discussion. So I wanted to share some of what was voiced at the last meeting, where we dove into what do we mean by a revitalized neighborhood, and it is inherently a subjective concept, but this is some of what we've heard, and you can see there's a lot to read here, but you can see it cuts across physical improvements to the neighborhood and kind of social, economic type of improvements. I think that safe to say that there's a diversity of ideas here, but fundamentally we're talking about improving the outcomes of people who live in the neighborhood and access to opportunity and healthy environment to live in. And so, part of this is the physical character of the neighborhood, and it's a big part of it. And we moved from there into this idea of the early action projects, which is specifically aimed at making these physical improvements to the neighborhood in the short term, meaning like next year or the year after, but basically prior to doing a full redevelopment of the community. What are these incremental projects that we might be able to take on that could start to sow the seeds for the kind of neighborhood we'd like to see? And again, we didn't get too deep into it, so there's just a handful of ideas here, but I want to build on this discussion tonight and talk a little bit more about what we can do with the early action projects. So Maggie's team has developed this brochure that we're going to share at the event on the 21st and the 20th. And so it's still being tweaked, but the idea here is basically what I've just said. We're trying to, this paragraph here, support the planning process through engaging the community, building capacity, fostering social cohesion, otherwise reinforcing the planning process. They must be responsive to the neighborhood needs and must be used for physical, community development or economic development projects. And more importantly, we have $100,000. So, which can go fast on certain types of projects, but this is probably a better slide just to explain what the funds can or can't be used for. So one of the major distinctions is that the goal here is not to duplicate things that should already be done, more basic infrastructure, like streets or sidewalks. However, we can do those things if they have a kind of community aspect, if there is an art component to them, a placemaking. That's a term where we take a streetscape that people typically just walk past or drive past and don't really appreciate it, and we do something there that really gives it some attention. These are kind of community pride of place projects, and so there's a lot of things that we can do with the funding that could fulfill some of those basic needs that people might see already today. And I think some of these like facade improvements, I think we tend to see those more in places where there's a lot of street businesses, so there may not be as many opportunities in our area for that, but I want to get into talking about this more, so we can go back to this if we need to, but this is just a reference point.
Hey, Eric?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for a half second
Sure.
just for a question? It's Paul Rankin. You said you got 2 years. I guess that's a hard stop. And so what is that, since the project's already sort of underway, what does that translate into? When does this have to be done by?
Maggie can correct me, but I believe that would be 2 years from this past June. Is that right?
It would be, no, 2 years from November. So November 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
November 2023.
2023.
So a year and a couple of months.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So just a few more slides. I want to just share a few things, new slides and some from last meeting. We talked about complete neighborhood. I just kind of want to revisit some of what was shared there, because these were we shared a lot of precedents of places, many of which are other choice neighborhood projects, and these were the types of precedents we shared, the kinds of projects that are improving neighborhoods in other cities. And I want to highlight the examples for connected and walkable places, which I think of when you think of a complete neighborhood or one that's connected to the larger city. It's really hard to imagine that without streets that are walkable, that are safe for people who aren't driving, walking or biking, pushing a stroller, catching a bus. It's really hard to imagine a connected, complete neighborhood without that basic infrastructure. So the planning team, one of the first things the planning team has done is look at that street infrastructure. And it's really interesting to see, basically in green, we've highlighted the streets that have sidewalks on both sides. And anybody who's lived in Annapolis would acknowledge that doesn't necessarily mean these are great sidewalks. They might be narrow, they may have utility poles in the middle of them, but they're there. You can see in yellow the Eastport Substation, Harbor House communities, and then the orange are sidewalks where you have them on one side of the street, and then you can see a lot of gaps in here. You can see in the part of Eastport, north of 6th Street, pretty intact street network. And you can kind of see it just starts to fragment a bit as you go south. And so, I think of that as something that's problematic, as a complete neighborhood. And some of the things that the planning team has begun to highlight, are the fact that you have, with the Eastport Terrace and Harbor House community, you have essentially a large super block that doesn't have a lot of connectivity in between. It's kind of part of the city, but you don't have a lot of through traffic going through the community. And then you also have close connection to Truxton Park as the bird flies, and there's an existing trail there, but it's not necessarily very clear to a lot of people who don't use it regularly. And they've highlighted on the left some of the things about the streetscapes that are basically problematic for livability. And so this is just kind of a context. Some of the intersections that really define this neighborhood, it's not hard to see some of the things that could be done to it. I mean, I drive through this or bike through this almost every day. You see parents with kids waiting at the corners, just kind of huddled up. There's no real shelter at the bus stops. There is one at Eastport Community Center. There's not a lot of shade here. There's basically great crosswalks. And sidewalks are there, but
Eric, the crosswalks aren't there anymore. This picture's a few years old. The crosswalks are basically MIA now.
Good pickup. So lot of potential here. The intersection of Boucher and President, you have one sidewalk, no sidewalks anywhere else. You have a sign that, the standard drive like your kids live here sign, which seems to imply that people are driving through here fast and not, if there's people walking in the street because there's no sidewalks, that becomes a hazardous situation. And then here at President Street, where it meets Tyler Avenue, it's anybody who goes through here on a bike or on foot knows that this is Tyler is a challenging street to cross. There is a crosswalk just up off this close to the edge of the photo, but this is not a pleasant place to be as a pedestrian or on a bike. So these are kind of basic improvements, and it's helpful to start thinking about these basic needs, I think, in terms of what could be done to improve the situation in a way that is also about creating a community project. We have the benefit of a kind of a movement going on for many years now in this country, internationally, called Complete Streets, which is basically a way of saying that streets that are complete should be accessible to all types of people, not just people driving through, but particularly people who have special needs or walking, biking, in a wheelchair, pushing a stroller, and so there's a great organization called the National Association of City Transportation Officials that put out guides that really help to explain what we mean by complete streets. And this is one of the visuals from their guidebook. So you can kind of start to see, think about this in the context of President Street, and you can kind of see how far, behind we are in terms of having a complete street there. Matthew, from the planning team with Hort Copeland Mock Architects, they're working on another choice neighborhood project in Baltimore, and this is one of the parts of that. It's a redesign of Caroline Street in Baltimore, and you can kind of see what they're very different context than Art neighborhood, but you can see how they're trying to make it a better street for all types of people. You know, as part of their project, they're looking at creating a through corridor, kind of breaking up the large block of housing that was there previously, so that you're kind of integrating that community into the larger city. This on the image on the right is just a trail elsewhere in Baltimore that some of you might be familiar with, that connects two neighborhoods near the Johns Hopkins University. And then some of the things that we shared at last meeting, just to kind of speak to what else goes into a complete street to make it more complete, or stormwater improvements, artworks that can kind of improve the intersection for pedestrians, also make it look better. Shade, street trees, and places for people to sit. And, you know, one of the really the most basic ways of impacting a streetscape is just by moving the curb. You know, I know it's a sore subject. It does take a long time to make changes to city streets in Annapolis and elsewhere. And there's some of the people on this call have been working on a streetscape improvement on Chesapeake Avenue for many years by Bakers and Company. Yeah, that's one example of essentially what we can do if we move the curbs and create a different intersection. But you can see these are all from that Urban Streets Design Guide. You know, basic things we can do when we move the curb. And part of the reason for doing that is you tighten up the street, so then cars drive more cautiously. You have a shorter distance for pedestrians to walk. You can look better, and you also don't get into complicated property line issues when you try to expand into somebody's property. So that's partly why we try to keep these projects in that public right of way that is more defined. So getting a little technical here, but I want to just, before we get into discussion, these are just some of the more prominent organizations and initiatives happening today that are really about improving streetscapes and neighborhoods through these types of activities. And Better Block is really on they've been around for many years, but they've really done these kind of activities all over the country, and pretty impressive amount of work. And then, you know, I don't want to say that every project just needs to use paint, but it certainly is a very effective way at creating different types of streetscape environments that are safer and look better and can really promote community pride. Bloomberg Foundation is one of the organizations that's really been pushing this. We actually, as a city, we applied for a project through them 2 years ago, didn't get funded, but that would have been in the Clay Street area at the Stanton Center. And this type of practice, where you basically define public area that is currently not well defined, has become just a very prominent, affordable way of changing a streetscape and community condition. And I just wanted to share some of the examples that other cities are doing. In fact, the one on the bottom middle is in Annapolis. It's an extension to the Poplar Trail that we're working on. But you can see, I mean, these are all relatively affordable projects, and they're working with materials that are very flexible and interchangeable, and it definitely helps to kind of create a different condition. You can really try out things this way. So I wanted to shift now to kind of more of a discussion. It's 7:15. we have till 8 o'clock, and we don't have to talk about streetscape projects, but that is something that was shared at the last meeting. And so, I would be interested to hear folks' ideas about, I'm going to shift over to kind of capturing ideas on this Jamboard as I've done on previous meetings. But does somebody have any thoughts on, what we, a particular place or particular idea for an early action activity that we should be looking at?
Eric, this is Alba. Actually, I don't have an idea, but I have two questions before you move forward.
Yeah.
The first question is related with the community workshops that I'm going to happen on the 21st. So I assuming you are going to advertise this to the community members in both language, English and Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
That's a question. Do you have are you reaching out to the Hispanic community in their own language?
Well, we are about to do that. I don't think we've done that yet, but we were planning on having translation available at the meetings. I'm actually not sure if the announcements have gone out in Spanish language yet, but
because if you have the flyer translated and you can email it to me, I can distribute it among our bilingual facilitators, especially the ones that are located in the Eastport area. So families can get the information through the kids. We can send that via school, but we need, since this is something coming out of the school system, we won't be able to translate it. Someone needs to translate it. Okay, that's the first idea. And also the second idea is, since you're talking about the early action project ideas, once you guys decide about the beautification of the art on the street, we may like to explore our art department. How can we contribute in that endeavor, especially with our middle and high school students? I don't know. I don't know if Annapolis Middle is the one that is the attendance area for Eastport, and then Annapolis High School. We can think of some very talented kids that they can be helping in this situation.
That's a great point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll definitely be reaching out to you. I think we can use the school system's help in getting the word out about these events for sure.
Okay.
And to follow up on that, the middle school and the high school, the kids have various projects they have to do. Both of them are IB schools. The middle school's IB for everybody, and there's always a search for community projects and different ways to help. So that would be really fantastic. I just wanted to also say that I mean, the projects that you put there, Boucher, President and Madison, President and Tyler, I think that whole streetscape from Tyler down to Boucher and then from, all along Madison, improving that, I think would be, I think, great for the community. We all talk about pride in our community, and it's definitely one of the more rundown areas for being a major center of both pedestrian and vehicle transportation. I know that right now they've torn up the pavement up at the top of President along Tyler, and they haven't started putting that back in yet. I was wondering if you had any idea, last year or the year before, when they replaced all the sidewalks, and a few of us called Public Works and pointed out that the sidewalks were not ADA accessible, and then the new sidewalks that they replaced them with were also not ADA accessible. And part of the reason they said that they couldn't fix that was because it wasn't a capital project. And there wasn't any budget, and if they went into the streets, that would be a whole, like, the whole, like, whether to go into the neighbors, into the yards or into the streets. But I think that's something that's happening right now, that it might be worth looking at, what can be done to make, because that's everybody who attends Annapolis Middle School from Madison Street to Tyler has to walk to school. They aren't allowed to take the bus. And that sidewalk is not ADA accessible. It's not a wide sidewalk at all, and cars, go up and, are pretty fast on it. So if we could fix that, it would not only improve the walking for the middle school kids, but just the streetscape in general.
Yeah, well, I can comment on that a little bit. So basically, it is challenging. I mean, speaking from experience, I approach these projects and I coordinate with our public works department. I'm a long range planner or comprehensive planner, and so I'm constantly looking for these ways of doing things differently and improving places in the city. And the problem with the way we do our street paving and sidewalk improvements currently, I would say, is that there is funding to maintain these streets, but anytime we're trying to actually change them, that becomes a separate project. And so we have certain fixed budget each year for just basically maintaining the roads and sidewalks, meaning paving them, making them ADA compliant to the extent that we can without doing a more significant project. So that means adding ADA compliant curb ramps at the corners, which is something people have probably noticed, and widening sidewalks or putting in new sidewalks does become a separate project, unfortunately. And it's just, I admit it's a frustrating process, but it's just basically needed because it requires a different level of funding and design and engineering because of impacts that end up happening for stormwater and other just kind of compounded issues. So we're limited in terms of doing things while the streetscape is being paved. The things that we can do, which I generally focus on, are restriping the street. If there's a bike lane recommendation or shared lane markings, where you see the symbol with the bicyclist that tells drivers that it's a shared street. Those are the things that we can do, just kind of the surface generally. And it's not what you want to hear, but that's kind of but what we can do is kind of get the ball rolling with this project on kind of what the bigger needs are, so that I think the reality with this project will be able to do something more transformative for President Street, at least, for the portion closer to the HACA communities and Madison Street, most likely. So I think that important thing is to get the ideas out right now, so we kind of are all aware of what's needed. Mike, go for it.
Yeah, well, I think both you, Eric, and Jess highlighted an important issue, is that the crosswalk at President and Madison, it should look like it does in the picture, but it doesn't. And if we're looking for a one-off project that doesn't involve widening sidewalks, and I think a lot of the ADA stuff is there, it's really just about making improvements to that four-way crosswalk so that people can use it every day. And I think I'd probably include some trash receptacles, because I don't think there are trash receptacles on that corner as well. And it is a gathering spot for students or for people who are taking the bus to their work. And I think that's a hot spot. I think that should be considered.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, gosh, I mean, I go through that intersection so much and I haven't picked up on some of the basic things you guys are saying. So I want to just capture this. I mean, that's kind of the central place for this area in my mind. And so I feel like that intersection could really be great, you know.
Trash cans are actually part of, there was already a project that we were working on. Dave Gerald should have had information, so maybe Mike has it, about putting trash cans at that intersection. So that might help.
That's good to know. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I don't have more information on the trash cans, but I know that it's been something that's been asked for a long time, and it certainly falls under this this project. Also, you highlighted earlier the trail that connects residents from that area to Truxton Park, which is, you know, an underutilized gem in the city. And I think that any kind of improvements that can be made there, even if it's just, you know, signage and accessibility to the access point on that trail, would be a really good idea.
And replacing the at-grade crossing, which has gone missing. That's a great point, Mike, about that, the signage and everything. But also there was an at-grade crossing that we worked hard to get, and now it's gone.
The bridge you're talking about.
At-grade crossing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know why that was taken away?
No, I don't think anybody knows, actually. I think it's a big mystery, to be honest. I think there was some concern at first that maybe it got washed away, but I don't think it's really turned up. We are not aware. I mean, nobody at the city that I've spoken with has any idea what happened to it. So that's a good point. Yeah, for those who aren't familiar with this location, I mean, this is really that Hawkins Cove area that's behind Eastport Terrace Harbor House communities. It's a connection to Spa Creek. There's a kind of a dilapidated pier there, and there is an informal trail that goes to Truxton Park that people use, and so the idea of making it more visible and marked and cleaned up would be a really good thing. The city is working on a project at Hawkins Cove that's more of a community open space project and a restoration project that would connect with this trail, but the funding for that trail project still needs to be found. So that could be a great use here. Oh, Jane, sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
So could you clarify, this is early action, meaning that these things, whatever this project is, should be finished in basically the next year?
Yeah.
And you know, you mentioned bakers. You and I have discussed how it's kind of watching grass grow to see a very minor improvement at bakers happen. So what I'm wondering is, you have limited time, limited money, and I get the sense that this early action is to try to bring people together over something visible that happens in this area that portends community, that it's kind of a wayfinding or you know, like a mural here. This is going to be a new community. So I was just on a call today with the Ross grant with Bridget, actually, and there was talk about how popular the farmers market was. And I'm wondering if you combined intersection improvements at President and Madison with kind of a placemaking, like behind the Harbor House sign of a spring to next fall market. Now, Abby Deal wouldn't want to hear this, but if you could get a really thriving farmers market going all summer into the fall that is used by the whole community in a nicely organized, cleaned up intersection with maybe benches and trash cans, and try to get Maryland Hall and the other organizations have great resources for arts and music, and try to create almost an event space that's regular with this aspect of farmers markets. I think it would kind of get at what we're hoping to have happen with the big project.
That's a great idea. I think I do think about that space, where the sign is. It's a place that has been used, I think, for temporary events, and I've seen tents up, for events and signage.
It's often used for Unity Day, things for the Residents Council at Eastport Terrace Harbor House put together. But there should be a space that people gather. Now, people gather there now, and I think residents would tell you it's not always for good. But that doesn't mean that it can't be the source of gathering in different times and days. But I guess I really want to put a point on it's limited time and limited money.
Yeah.
And it should be something that as many people will take advantage of, will see, will feel the impetus of this project.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point. So it's almost like, there's like a Venn diagram of things that don't cost a lot of money, can be done really
quickly,
and then also have a huge impact, and there's like that shared area in between those overlapping circles that is probably,
and it gets at the whole issue of food desert and community health. And I think Bridget and Melissa could speak more to, there seems to be a pretty consistent request on the part of residents for fresh food. There's also the whole community garden. There's some really dedicated community gardeners living in Eastport Terrace Harbor House.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, this is something that we brought up at the first neighborhood task force meeting, that this is the one food desert in the Annapolis area, meaning you have a significant distance to a grocery store. For somebody who doesn't have a car, it's challenging. You also have a high concentration of lower income people who don't have access to good, healthy food. So that's a great point. I mean, we do have.
I wanted to make a comment if I could. And I totally support the idea that Jane just threw out. I think that's a great idea. But something else that I thought about it when you were showing the examples, I think with this CNI project, there's so much focus and energy on the rental housing, right? That's going to be redeveloped and with good reason. But, it is true that area is just surrounded by, a lot of single family residential. There's a lot of homeowners that are in the area. And I saw, on one of your slides, the suggestions about owner occupied facade replacements. And, I think to the extent that we can support the homeowners in the surrounding areas, it would be, it'd be a great thing to be able to do. Even if it's a matter of replacing their exterior lighting to perhaps give more lighting to the, sidewalks, anyone who needs more accessibility, if they are having difficulty getting in and out of the house, and having a ramp installed would be helpful. Things along that line. Understanding that it is a finite amount of money and that would only go so far, but I think thinking in terms of the surrounding owner occupied homes would be another consideration.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I think it is important to recognize that we have immediately adjacent to Eastport Substation, we do have row house townhouses and detached houses that where I'm sure people could use that assistance for sure. I'm sure there's a precedent for that in some of the other CNI projects. So it could be a program. We could dedicate a portion of the funding to a program like that, and people would apply and, with an idea.
So Eric, that's, I would just wanted to add, and thank you for saying that it can be a few different things, right? The whole idea is overall prioritizing how this money gets spent. $100,000 isn't a lot of money. So it doesn't have to be just one idea, but it gets pretty tricky to divide that small pot into multiple projects. So
yeah. Gotcha. And I don't think of, aside from the Eastport shopping, I don't think of the neighborhood, within our larger study areas having many small businesses, but there are some, and I know there's some in Harbor House and, Lavelle. You have a bit, you have an organization operating there. I mean, I think there could be an opportunity to give some of the organizations or businesses that are in the community already a lift with this funding, give them more visibility. And there's probably something there as well. What else?
I think that's a great point. I think it's important to note that unlike maybe in some other areas of Eastport, this area of Eastport is also a really giant mix of low and moderate income housing outside of the HACA buildings all around there. There's and so I think that's always really important to keep in mind, that it's not like there's a huge giant divide from one side of President Street to the other in terms of incomes and everything else.
Mm-hmm. What else on people's minds? I think, we will be continuing this conversation. I mean, I think we probably have to figure out maybe by early 2023, would you say like January or so, we probably need to have some concrete ideas, Maggie, for how we want to
Yeah, I mean, the earlier the better.
Yeah, the earlier.
Deadline. I think the goal really is to have everybody come to that meeting on September 21st.
Yeah.
Have a sort of activity area that's about early action activities and really just give us your ideas. What do you like? We could, and with the goal of ultimately seeing what sort of bubbles to the top. There's going to be some trends that we see. There's going to be some sort of overarching ideas, and then prioritizing and figuring out what we want to choose. I think, the sooner the better, but we want it to be, organic, but also a consensus driven decision when we get to what we want to do. So the sooner we start that, the better.
Okay, yeah, I know we'll probably get a number of other ideas at the events on the 20th and 21st. So we can take this up at the next meeting. I think we'll be meeting back again in early October, and don't have an agenda for that yet, but I think we can keep talking about some of this, and I think we can digest some of what we hear at the meetings on the 20th and 21st, and I think maybe our planning consultant team can share some more updates on what we learned from those meetings. But I think this is a good start. We can probably end the meeting early if people don't have other thoughts. I mean, I think Jane, go ahead. I have a closing slide, but go for it.
I'm really struck by the timeline, and you always think, oh, it's 2 years, but now really it's almost 1 year. So would it be possible for Maggie or someone else to take this group through what the timeline is for the next year? How do you end up with the plan on November, whatever, 2020, what is that, 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we have an answer, we have a timeline. And so it actually, Eric, if you wouldn't mind going back to your first slides that had the boxes planning process, there's actually a little timeline at the bottom that gives us what the big deliverables are. And then I can sort of explain how we fill in between that. Yes, so thank you. So this is the slide. So the first big HUD deliverable that HACA and the city will be submitting is an outline with content. That's an outline.
Uh-oh. We lost you, Maggie. I don't know if you can hear us, or is there?
Yeah, she froze.
Okay, you're back.
All right, I'm going to turn my camera off. I'm sorry. So you can't see me do this and then get frozen. Okay, hold on. All right, thank you. I have an unstable internet connection, so just let me know. So the overall deliverable at the end of this process is a final transformation plan that looks at a comprehensive plan for housing, neighborhood, and so the first deliverable 1 year in, which would be November of this year, is an outline with content. So that's going to be outlining the major sections, and that's going to be, the research and analysis we did, the findings, the engagement process, resident survey, and then really looking at, what task forces and the community and the residents in general have expressed are their priorities for neighborhood planning, housing planning, and people and supportive services. So that's the first thing in November is what we're going to have is an outline. It'll be probably, 10, 15 page document. Then May 2023, so 6 months later, is really the draft transformation plan. And that's really going to be close to final. So in between that, that's a 6-month process right there. We're really trying to finalize what the planning activities, what the plan says and what the transformation plan objectives are in that 6-month time period. Then between that May 2023 and November 2023 is really operationalizing that, if that makes sense. Like, how are we going to implement all of these, the housing plan and various neighborhood plans and supportive services programming that we have designed so that it's actionable at the end of this 2-year process. So look at that May 2023. That's why we have it as a different color, because that's really, that draft plan hopefully will encapsulate pretty much everything that we have come up with collectively through this process. And then that last 6 months is really just working through the details of how it's going to get implemented. How are we going to fund the housing, right? That's going to be a big ticket item. What specific economic development activities, what kind of funding do we need, and how are we going to implement that? So that's the ultimate timeline, but really look at that May 2023 is when the draft plan that we all collectively come up with is going to be published. So that's a tight turnaround. So to get us to that plan, we are going to have a series of workshops, which that's the September 21, 20th for the residents, 21 for residents and community residents, is really the first step. We will have a design charrette. We will have some larger, community workshops working through all these various ideas and visioning and making sure we're prioritizing what everybody is really interested in seeing. Given the fact that we have limited resources, what are we prioritizing and how are we going to get that done? So that's really how we're going to get there, is through these community workshops, through these task forces. This is a great venue to really vet a lot of these ideas and work through more of the details with people that are really interested in them, as well as stakeholders and people that might be able to bring resources to bear to that process. So that's really why it's so important for these task force meetings, especially when we get into this next year. Am I breaking up?
No, you're good.
Okay, sorry. But especially when we get into this next, between November and May, though all these workshops and these task force meetings are going to be very critical to really refining and prioritizing all of those ideas, if that makes sense. So it's going to be, it's sort of, we've been moving along and it's going to pick up the pace really quickly here.
Yeah, I feel like we've been just kind of dancing around the edges a little bit. And then once we start to get into the actual plan ideas, it's starting feeling more real.
Also, one thing I wanted to mention is that in a couple months, we plan on beginning the solicitation process for master developer. And so we anticipate that by early spring, we will have a developer on board that will help us craft the plan. And also further help develop the plan with all of our input from the different task forces and all these community meetings. And so we plan on bringing that developer on very early in this process so they can assist us. So process speaking, by the time the plan is completed as a document, it'll be in play. So at least at the very early stages.
Yes.
This is Paul.
I'll go for it.
Appreciate that overview, Maggie, of the planning process, but that's the broad planning process, which obviously is the big deal here. But lost in there, at least to me, is sort of this 100 grand, get something done by November of 23. Is there a reporting time and schedule for that? I mean, Eric just said, okay, let's have something by January. Are you really going to be able to get something done, money allocated, project and finished? Or is this, it doesn't have to be completed by November? I mean, where does that fit into this?
It is supposed to be completed by November. That's, those are the guidelines provided by HUD as part of the grant award.
Right.
I mean, of course, there's always some, we're going to be complete by November. Let's say that. There's always some flexibility, but let's plan on November 2023. That's what their requirements are. So do
you have to tell them anything about it at any point?
Yes.
And if so,
there is a process, and that's why we have to give them a brief proposal that tells them how we want to fund the money. I mean, use the money, what we want to fund, how it's going to contribute to the overall goal of the early action activities, and then have to prove it before we can spend the money. So it's not a long, drawn out process. And as long as we're not proposing anything that's just totally, really stretching the guidelines, it shouldn't take too long to get approved.
And when, so Eric, and I'm not picking on you, Eric. When is that due to HUD? Or is it not due to HUD until we feel like?
Yeah, there's no set timeline from HUD. It's just, as you've pointed out, the restriction is that we can't use the money until they approve it. So the sooner we get a proposal to them and get their approval, the sooner we can start spending the money.
Great, thank you.
There's no set deliverable schedule for that.
Got it. Thank you.
I just want to add that I've been really impressed with the team at HUD that oversees this program. And, and HUD may seem like this enormous federal agency to most of us, but this program within HUD is very specific and has its own staff, and they actually do these peer exchange events where they bring all the cities together that are doing these Jewish neighborhood projects. And I've been very impressed with how they kind of sharing what's worked, what hasn't worked, and really trying to help these projects succeed. So when Maggie says that it's a pretty quick turnaround, I have pretty good confidence that that's the case. It's just there's a lot of hand holding in this process. So Jane?
Could I ask definitional things? When it says at the bottom, TP, that's the transformational plan. So is in May, if there was a deliverable that you showed the task force and the community, would that be a picture and description of this is how many units we're going to put here, and this is how many units we're going to put there, and this is the design elements? And if that's true, what is the track for things like planning commission? How does that all work together? I mean, or let me back up. Does this have to go to the planning commission?
That would depend on the type of project that it is, and if it entails planning commission approval.
Yeah, I mean, the larger project would definitely be going to planning commission. I mean, it would be essentially like a planned unit, a planned development, but
right.
Yeah, that process would unfold once the project is defined, so.
Well, Eric, you probably know why I'm worried about this because, look at the Willows. I mean, I just don't think the system works very well, I'll put it that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, it's different situations. And
but I just worry that, I mean, this has been very helpful, this description in the last 10 minutes, but I think in my mind, it's still a little unclear how it all works. So it'd be great if we can talk about this again with more concreteness.
And I thank you, Jane. And I did want to just point out, for purposes of, this is not an Annapolis Planning Commission or governmental processes comment. It's just more of a HUD deliverable requirement, is that we don't have to have planning approval to submit this plan, right? So this plan doesn't require planning approval to be finalized.
Gotcha.
As we are designing the housing, we'll be taking all of that into consideration and trying to design something that works and is the sort of least difficult to get through. Right. So that are considerations. So, but as far as completing
that's actually encouraging because to the extent you would have HUD behind something, you might have more leverage with getting, how can I say this? Getting the planning commission to honor the planning that has gone into it.
Yeah. No, I mean, you bring up a good point, Jane, that something I try to do with all the other planning work that we do, which is to keep the planning commission up to date on the progress and make sure that they're aware of how things are moving. And so it's not just they're not stunned by it when we suddenly show them something. So I think, and I do think that was one of the issues with the Willows, that we just didn't get to them early enough. But so I'm going to make a point of just giving them a brief update, I think, just to like give them, I think, just at least an overview at this point of where we're going with this project. So that, and probably anticipate doing some more regular checking.
Yeah, I just think, you know, if you could get from them now the dates that they will give you a place at a work session, and almost, I don't mean call their bluff, but say, you know, you want input, we need dates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, good point. All right. Well, I would just say at this point, I'll go to our last slide. And as I've done at the last meetings, just want to encourage anybody here tonight to reach out to others who you think should be part of this conversation, other perspectives that aren't here in particular. Please attend the event on September 21st and help to promote that. And Alba will be back in touch with you at the public school system. Really appreciate your offer to get the word out through students, and we'll work on the translation. And just stay tuned for, I'm going to be back in touch with a date for the next meeting in early October. And what happens, for those who haven't been on these before, I just typically pick a date that doesn't seem to conflict with other meetings, particularly boards and commissions that the city has. I want to acknowledge that Julian Jacques, who's on the call right now. I mean, he's working for the city TV station, kind of managing the back end of these meetings, and we have a limited staff, and we do a unbelievable number of public meetings at the city. So I just generally try to thread the needle on that, knowing that people who come to these meetings are often on other boards and commissions, and there's other conflicts. So that's really the basic thinking that goes on here. But I will be picking a date and then sending out a notice of that, and then we typically add that to the newsletter for this project, and I get a number of other inquiries to get added to the invite. So that's how I'll be keeping this going. And any last questions before we adjourn? All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Look forward to seeing you on the 21st. And, reach out to me if you have any other questions or concerns or ideas. I'll be here. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Eric.
All right.